London is once again under siege, as a string of bizarre attacks on British citizens returned from India sends rumors flying and cast a pall upon Queen Victoria's rule. At least, that's what the back of Volume 4 says. Hi, welcome to my Black Butler Deep Dive, a series of videos in which I have way too much to say about each and every story arc in the Black Butler manga. In this latest installment, we'll be taking a look at what the fan wiki calls the Indian Butler arc. Fun fact, this story arc is also where the anime starts to diverge from canon. If you know, you know. And if you don't know, but you've at least seen the anime, well, I guess you'll find out by the time we're finished here today. Anyway, let us dive in as Ciel and the gang become fully entrenched in winter. Oh boy, this arc starts us off with the doozy. A nice explanation of what the weather and vibes are like in England during the winter, followed by the crimes of someone who is rightfully fed up with British colonization. No worries though, despite how this may look, there are no fatalities here, just some good old-fashioned battery and humiliation. I really did spend the last decade or so believing these guys were murdered. Reading comprehension who? I clearly don't know her. A bit of historical context for this arc. Between the years of 1757 and 1947, Britain had their grubby colonizing hands in India. Not only did they lay claim to an already existing country, but after an attempt of a rebellion in 1857, Britain established the British Raj in 1858, which is roughly 30 years before Black Butler takes place. Throughout the British Raj, India changed a lot, and there were many issues that arose or became worse during this time. Colonization is never good and only benefits the colonizers, oftentimes stripping places of their culture or attempting to do so, and taking advantage of the people being colonized. Black Butler also provides a bit of information about the types of people who were falling victim to these crimes. These victims were Indian Nabobs, or Anglo-Indians, which were basically random-ass white landlords who wanted to live like kings, so they'd go to India where they could afford to do so. So you can see why someone within the Black Butler universe may be a bit disgruntled with England and these wannabe luxurious guys. Anyway, Ciel says ACAB, and also, colonization. Or at least he looks down on the white guys going to live in India for selfish reasons. I'm choosing to believe it is not Ciel looking down on people who are less fortunate than him, because he doesn't seem to exhibit a whole lot of classism attitudes. I think he just thinks these guys are lowly scum. That seems to be how he talks about them, at least. Anyway, due to orders from the Queen, Ciel is on the case to figure out who is attacking these guys and who is disgruntled with England's occupation in India, perhaps? There is the assumption that the culprit is someone from India who has snuck into England. I mean, I guess it makes sense, but we'll see how it plays out. Anyway, we get another explanation as to who Ciel is to the Queen and the role of the Phantom Hive family. The Queen's watchdog, aka the Earl of Phantom Hive, is to cover up the crimes of royals and also protect the family at all costs. The royal family, that is. This part is new to Ciel's job description, by the way, which I find interesting. Previously, he was just extracting the Queen's will on the underworld and keeping certain things under control, and also stopping others as the Queen saw fit. But now he's also to cover up and protect the royal family. Makes sense. Got it. Also, I am obsessed with the framing here. So good. Chef's kiss. Really and truly. Ciel and Sebastian pay Lau a visit, because apparently he knows all there is to know about the South Asian activity in London's underworld. Okay. We finally get to learn who Lao is, though, and what his role is in the underworld. Such a silly little guy is actually the top official of the crime syndicate Jing Bang. Ciel asks Lao for his help in conducting their investigation, even though he doesn't know anything. That's kind of Lao's bit. He'll talk like he knows something, and then he'll be like, yeah, I don't know what I'm talking about. And everyone's like, so you're just carrying on? And you really didn't know what you were talking about? Okay, love that about him. So Ciel asks Lao for his help. However, when they're out and about, they stumble across a gang of desperate people from India. These people do start a problem with Ciel in an attempt to get money or something, but they get interrupted by a well-dressed Indian man, Lord Soma, and his unusually strong servant, Agni. We get a short fight between Sebastian and Agni, which showcases that Agni can hold his own in a fight against a demon. But once Soma learns that Ciel and Sebastian did not pick a fight, and that the others were at fault here, he swaps his focus to shutting down those who were seeking to do harm for no reason. Now it's clear that this confrontation was just a setup to show us that Agni is strong, like big strong, and that Soma and Agni hold no ill will. And the people on the street were essentially just a tool to give Yano Toboso an excuse to show us what Agni can do without making him an antagonistic force. So that's fine, I guess. I also find it really interesting that in the manga they make a point to say that Soma and Agni's English is really good and does not have an accent.
Namaste, Ji. Good morning.
Why are you in my room?
We are going out and about, kid. Show us around town.
It's something that the English dub did not adhere to. And somehow Soma and Agni have followed them home. There's a bit of culture shock and also Soma being stubborn going on here. He insists that Ciel bend to the customs he is used to, even though such a thing is seen as strange or rude to Ciel. It's also now time for Agni and Sebastian to have a butler off, with Agni rushing to make chai for everyone and Sebastian insisting that getting tea should be his job. Also, Soma hadn't really taken care of figuring out where he and Agni were to stay while in London, so now he's invited himself to stay with Ciel. Which, I'm not sure why Ciel just kind of let Soma walk in and walk all over him, but it's very funny, and I'm glad he did, because I really, really like Soma. This is also where we actually learn who Soma is, and he's a prince from Bengal, with at least 25 other siblings. He's iconic. He's a bit selfish and self-centered, but hey, Ciel can be too. They're just pampered rich kids living in a pampered world. And now I sound like Haruhi from Ouran High School Host Club.
I hate all these damn rich people.
Wakey wakey! Wait, that's not Sebastian. Agni has taken his butler duties, even though he's a guest. Sure, it's a huge shock to Mayren, Bard, and Finny, but Sebastian seems to really appreciate it. So it's no wonder many of us read them as being good friends. There's a tidbit about the Hindu goddess Kali, which is pretty cool. I also find it funny that Sebastian mentioned needing to be wary of her when he visits India. Like, sure, the man is expecting to go to India and get into a fight with literal Hindu gods? Okay, pop off king, but maybe don't pop off that hard, because that seems a little disrespectful. Like, what are you doing? Why are you planning to fight these Hindu gods? But okay, I digress. We then learn that Soma is looking for a woman who used to live in his palace. However, his photograph of her is pretty much just a child's drawing. I mean, drawing people is hard, I'll give him that. And I'm sure he tried his best, but honestly, I think the lack of seriousness in this drawing perfectly sums up the tone of this story arc. Serious in pursuit on the surface, but ultimately a little bit silly. Kind of low stakes even. This vibe is supported when we get a montage of Ciel just trying to go about his daily studies and work, only to be interrupted by Agni and Soma wanting to spend time with him. There's a bit of culture clash going on here, which is supposed to be where the comedy is coming from. I'll be honest, I don't particularly find it all that funny, but it's also just like the miscommunication trope, which I'm not a huge fan of. But it works here to further showcase Soma's personality. He's very kind-hearted and just wants to help CL out, but he's a little too sure of himself. He's childish and he's very persistent. He's almost more of a nuisance than he is a helpful presence like he wants to be. Even when he may not be in the right, he's still like set in his ways and set in thinking he's doing the right thing. Honestly, it's a really fun and silly way to establish those traits about him. Considering that Prince Soma is about to go on a very important character arc during the storyline and throughout the background of the rest of the manga, it's a fun little setup to his character. Our montage comes to a head when CL gets overly fed up with Soma's need for attention, and he initiates a duel. Because that's... Honestly, I can't even say anything about that. That's a fun thing to do with friends. I mean, to be fair, I don't know how to duel. I'm more of a 1v1 killing them in Minecraft kind of person myself, but hey, CL didn't have Minecraft back then. Anyway, they engage in a duel. Soma literally just wants to hang out with CL, and CL is kind of wanting to flex some power play on the poor guy, which ends up resulting in Agni impulsively jumping in to Soma's aid, and cue Battle of the Butlers. Agni and Sebastian have so many similarities, and they seem to be evenly matched in abilities and loyalty. Honestly, I think these guys are narrative foils for one another, but we'll get into that in just a bit. Honestly, it's really nice to see CL and Sebastian fight some petty fights with low stakes. Of course, they're treated with the same intensity, but they lack the emotional punch that the Red Butler arc gave us just prior. Sebastian and Agni's duel is honestly a pretty even match, which sets up some really fun character dynamics if you ask me. And is that a glimpse of genuine respect I see from Sebastian? CL is unsure if Agni is human, but Sebastian can confirm that he is in fact just a man. However, he is a bit quirked up. He is a quirked up man, if you will. Agni wields a power that Sebastian never could, or Sebastian and CL never could. Honestly, I'm not entirely sure what Sebastian means by his phrasing here. Who is us? Us as the demon race, or us as Sebastian and CL? But honestly, both are probably true. A god's power isn't for demons or those who are contracted to demons. So, CL and Sebastian are both not included in this unique power that only a regular human could probably wield. And when I say regular human, I essentially just mean a human who is not tied to a demon. All humans would have the potential to do what Agni does. Possibly. Honestly, the power could just be patience though, because Agni is a master at being patient and working with the servant's strengths instead of getting frustrated with their faults the way Sebastian does. Much to Sebastian's shock, Agni has gotten everyone to work together smoothly to prepare the food. Smoothly being the key word here. Agni is legit so kind and goes out of his way to include everyone. What a sweet guy. However, Agni doesn't take compliments to his character super well, considering his past. Yep, it's backstory time. Agni was actually a little bit of a hellion and a bad guy back in the day. Agni and his family belonged to the highest caste. I believe it's Brahmin? I'm not entirely sure how to say it, I'm so sorry. Essentially, the highest caste, meaning they could directly serve the gods. However, Agni's father was kind of a bad influence, indulging in pleasures of the flesh, lust, greed, typical human problems. Agni grew up to be just like him, but worse, taking advantage of and hurting others for his own gain and satisfaction, up until the point that he was to be executed for his sins. That was until Prince Soma showed up. wishing to take him on as a sparring partner despite his sins. Prince Soma gave Agni a second chance, at life and at his faith. Cutting his hair, claiming who he once was is now dead, and he's to be reborn as a better man. Essentially saving Agni from execution and from himself. Soma's act of selfish kindness restored Agni's faith and provided him with the motivation to work hard at being a better person. It's in this sense that I consider Agni a narrative foil to Sebastian. They're both incredibly strong, good at what they do, and deeply loyal and devoted to their masters. However, Agni's relationship with Soma is one of genuine respect and admiration, whereas Sebastian and Ciel's relationship is full of malice and contempt. There's no respect, no admiration, and no understanding for one another. I also think it's notable that the roles of saving were swapped. Soma brought meaning into Agni's life, however, Sebastian is the one that changed things for Ciel. Agni was saved by Soma, but Ciel is doomed by Sebastian. Well, to be fair, he was saved by Sebastian, but he's also doomed by their contract, so the comparison is a little bit messy. Either way, Soma and Agni bring the good out in each other, while Sebastian and Ciel bring out the worst, the bad in one another. Sebastian and Agni appear to be so similar on the surface, however their motivations couldn't be more different. I also think it's interesting that Sebastian is merely pretending to be a good and noble person, but Agni is genuinely striving to be a good and noble person. So similar yet so different. After the meal is prepared, we learn a bit about Soma's family life and the woman he's looking for. Soma comes from a kind of dysfunctional family, led by a man who doesn't care about his children nor their mother. I'm unsure if Soma's father has multiple wives or baby mamas. He's got a lot of siblings, so it would make sense that the man had multiple wives, or it was from multiple mothers. Anyway, however, Soma found parental love in his nanny Mina, the woman who was always by his side, keeping him from being alone. However, he believes that Mina was taken from him by a British noble. Soma is rightfully upset by this. Mina was the one person he had growing up and the only person, aside from Agni, who he believes cares about him. Ciel is honestly kind of an ass about it though. However, there's more to his cold front than meets the eye. At this point in the story, we still don't know what Ciel went through, but we know he's lost a lot. From Madame Red's flashbacks, we were able to infer that the Phantom High family was pretty close. Ciel spent a lot of time with his family, and when they were taken from him, it was a lot. His parents were murdered, his aunt slaughtered right before his eyes. The only people we know of that he has left is Aunt Frances and Lizzie, and obviously Frances's husband and any other kids they may have, but so far we have not met them. So who knows? I know, because I've read past this, but you know what? Discussion for another day. Anyway, in comparison, losing a single servant isn't as painful as losing your entire family. Ciel has a lot of trauma. That much has been implied at the very least. So keep that in mind when he brushes Soma's feelings away with the sentiment that others have it worse, because he has it worse. There's a deeper pain here, and things that can't be healed, at least from Ciel's perspective. So Soma's pain feels a little bit silly to him. As Lapis from Steven Universe once said,
I've felt worse.
Also twin. Hear me out, okay? As Ciel leaves the conversation, he's thinking of his dead family members. His mother, his father, his aunt, that weird-looking dog, and a little boy who looks much like him. It may look like he's grieving his family and his position in it, but it's also an image of those who have died, and the bangs swoop the other way. Now let me spoil a thing. There was a popular fan theory back in the day called the 2CL theory. Basically, the legend goes that Ciel had a twin. And the twin is the real Ciel Phantom Hive. And the character we know is essentially taking his place after his death. There's a lot of hints and supporting evidence for this throughout most of the series, and becomes incredibly obvious as time goes on. It was later confirmed at the end of the Blue Sect arc, so I'm not going this in depth about foreshadowing for a mere fan theory. Although even when it was just a theory, the foreshadowing was really cool and worth taking a serious look at. I love foreshadowing, and I will point it out anytime we come across something, especially when it comes to the twins, because so many people were mad about it when it was revealed, like officially, at least in the American fandom. They thought it was a cheap tactic that wasn't actually built up and hinted at from the start. Anyway, they were wrong. Stay mad about it. I'm winning out here. I love this theory, and I love everything about it. It's not even a theory anymore, but you know what? Even though it's been official canon for several years now, the manga's gone at such a slow pace it doesn't feel like that long has passed. After Ciel was an asshole to Soma, he decides to initiate playing Old Maid with him. Spending time with the guy on his own accord? Who is this kid? Look at him go, making friends. I'm so proud of him. However, in a comedic turn of events, Soma actually has plans for that night, and on his way out, he tells Ciel that he needs to go to bed early in order to grow taller. Love him for that. Pop off king. Iconic. It's kind of amazing that Ciel has warmed up to Soma already, but that's just what it's like when an extrovert adopts an introverted friend. Anyway, that was a huge blow to Ciel's ego, who I don't think has ever had anyone turn down playing a game with him ever in his life. This little boy, I don't think has ever been told no, at least when it comes to playing games and like stuff like that. Before I say anything else, I am obsessed with the idea that Ciel didn't sleep well because he was too busy pouting and being in a sour mood because his cool older friend didn't want to play with him. How very much 13 years old of this kid. Anyway, Ciel and the gang are getting ready to start their day when they find out that another attack happened last night. The very night that Soma and Agni were out, and honestly stayed out pretty late as well. Lau immediately suspects them, stating that he thought they were sketch from the start. But Ciel is certain it couldn't have been them. They appear to have no motive, and they also just, like, their behavior from the day before doesn't really match up with Ciel's idea of the perfect culprit. Lau then suggests following them to see what they're really up to. So Ciel, Sebastian, and Lau become great stalkers to figure out what on earth is going on with these silly little guys. Which turns out to be nothing. They're just looking for someone, as they stated. Things are exactly as they seem. However, after they return home and Soma goes to bed, Agni does sneak out again on his own. And it's time to investigate, for real this time. Before we go any further though, can I please gush about Prince Soma for a moment? He's such a pure-hearted guy and I just want to hold him in my hands. I love him so much. He's not mad that his new friends are suspicious of him and Agni. He's also curious as to what Agni gets up to, so he just invites himself into the investigation. He's so open-minded and willing to readjust his beliefs and his opinions based on new information, and I love him dearly. I think he's a great influence for Ciel, or at least has the potential to be if they ever got to spend a lot of time around one another. Okay, back to the plot for now. Agni sneaks off to Harold West Jeb's place, where we find out that he's secretly working for this guy in order to bring Mina home. Or in other words, this random white guy is exploiting Agni and his power for his own personal gain, while holding the promise of letting Soma reunite with Mina over Agni's head. Honestly, Soma's kind of annoying in this part. Very young adult who thinks he knows everything when he really doesn't have a clue in the world. He rushes in, demanding answers of Agni, and ends up causing a bit of a scene. Harold West ends up putting Agni in the position to harm Soma. Boo, I hate this guy. Hate this guy. I see now why CL said he had the displeasure of meeting him. Also, it stated this loser is responsible for the attacks that have been ongoing that CL was supposed to be investigating this whole time. Which I guess they kind of were, because they suspected Agni. But anyway, beside the point. It's Dear Sebastian time. Very iconic, very memorable. What a great disguise. Agni is then ordered to kill this suspicious deer man. Betraying Soma and following orders of another, Agni regretfully engages in battle. I think he knows it's Sebastian. I don't know if he consciously knows, but I think he knows it's Sebastian. Anyway, Agni enters a state of samadhi, which is an intense state of concentration, or the final stage of Hindu yoga, in which union with divine is reached. Soma says that Agni can't be touched when in this state, which prompts a monologue on how humans can attain power through their faith and utmost love, something that Sebastian and other demons are incapable of. Again, this is the second time now that the manga states Sebastian is incapable of love. However, in this instance, it's in regards to the love a person may feel to their religious deities, which makes sense that Sebastian can't exercise faith since he's a demon, and most beliefs of the world class demons as either the bad guys or monsters here to tempt, ruin, and harm humans. Enough about how much of a demon Sebastian is. Prince Soma is rightfully upset about this perceived betrayal. He has a bit of a temper tantrum back at Ciel's place that would typically be the behavior you'd expect of a small child, and honestly, I think this shows us just how immature Soma actually is. Yeah, he's 17, I think, so he's not supposed to be a fully realized adult. But even for a 17-year-old, he's incredibly childish and sheltered. And after his meltdown, Sebastian takes the opportunity to treat him with the cruelty he probably dreams about treating Ciel to. But also, it's an act of tough love, and cruel words I think Soma needed to hear in order to grow past where he is currently. Soma has had everything handed to him, and he hasn't really worked to gain anything of his own. His relationships with others isn't something that he's built and cultivated for himself, more so just a product of his parents' wealth and status, aside from his budding friendship with Ciel, that is. But Ciel cuts this bullying session short, and he sticks up for Soma, stating that he very well could have ended up the same way if it wasn't for his trauma. And honestly, this is what I've been saying the whole time. I've been saying this. A lot of Ciel's negative traits and characteristics are, well, first and foremost, a direct result of his trauma, but also a direct result of how he was raised. Ciel may not be a prince, but he was still a nobleman. Raised in a way that is bound to bring up a selfish and spoiled kid, he really didn't stand a chance. He's a bit self-aware, and really not all that different from Prince Soma, and he knows that. To some extent, at least. He has sympathy for Soma at this moment because he understands where he's coming from, and this is also confirmation that Ciel isn't as selfish and cold-hearted as some like to make him out to be. Anyway, bit of a backstory reveal. We know Ciel spent a month somewhere? In a cage? Dear Lord, what horrors has this child witnessed? I guess we don't have to wonder for long what Ciel went through because, boy, it's flashback time. I feel like this goes without saying, but the full flashbacks for Ciel's backstory is very rough. I'm sure if you're watching this video, especially in the God-given year of 2023 or even later in the future, you're probably well aware of what all went down during that horrific month. But I still want to offer a warning that it's a lot. And yes, I will offer this warning every time I feel it's necessary, so I guess we'll be sitting down having this conversation again during the circus arc, and definitely for sure during the Blue Memory flashback arc where we see the full extent of the horrors. We all on the same page here? Alright. The manga takes place in first-person perspective for this flashback. A very important detail, okay? Alright? We're seeing things through the eyes of a younger version of the Ciel that we've spent the past 18 chapters with. That's important to denote as well. We watch as he discovers that his home is under attack, and his family is murdered. He stumbles across their bodies, which is a lot for anyone, especially a 10-year-old. I don't know if we actually know he's 10 during this at this point, but beside the point. Anyway, this kid is running for his life, and we see him approach Tanaka for help. Tanaka is desperate, though, to protect this child from seeing the carnage and getting hurt even more. But Tanaka is stabbed as well. The memory is cut here, and we see a man making a purchase, paying for more than 2 persons' worth. Y'all hear that? Also, he states that whatever he's buying is rare. Now, you could say that the rareness is the beauty of the Phantom Hive's child. That is something that kind of gets played up a little bit, especially in the anime, and especially during the Red Butler arc with the whole thing with Viscount Druid. But Google states that there is a 1 in 250 chance of having identical twins. You see where I'm going? That sounds kind of rare, doesn't it? It's less than 1%. I think it's about 0.4% to be exact, so less than 0.5%. I mean, that sounds pretty rare if you ask me. Sounds like he bought twins. The man states that they'll be branded with the mark of the beast. We see Ciel get branded. We see disembodied hands grabbing at him, holding him down. We see him curled up in a cage. Are we still in first person? I think so. We see cultists approaching the cage. It's time for mass. We see Ciel be sacrificed. Sebastian has been summoned. He states that this child is his master, the one who summoned him. And he also states that the sacrifice will never return. Huh. But didn't we just see Ciel get sacrificed? Interesting. Very interesting. I've got to stop talking like the 2 Ciel theory isn't canon, but it's so neat to really pick apart all the foreshadowing like we don't know it's true yet. Anyway, we see Ciel lock in and command Sebastian to kill them all, as he should. That's kind of like, I know me as a human being, I don't have the right to say that another human being deserves death, but those guys deserved to die. If you know, you know, and if you don't know, then you'll know by the end of the deep dive journey. And we're back in the present, where he's explaining the TLDR to Soma, of course leaving out the details of Sebastian's true nature. Soma doesn't really understand why Ciel is going as far as to risk his life to essentially get revenge, but Ciel more or less explains that this is his way of grieving. Well, he actually says that grieving and standing still isn't for him, and that he's got to do something since he's the one who's alive and standing. Sounds to me like he's grieving, and also maybe feeling guilty for being the sole survivor? We'll touch more on that idea later. Anyway, he keeps talking about how he's going to die later, so might as well play this game grasping at the spider's thread to pull himself up. This so-called strength is attributed to being human, but to be honest, I think all creatures in this universe exhibit self-preservation and the ability to hold grudges. You're not all that special for this, my boy. But his determination to help himself and take action is inspiring Soma, and that's all that really matters right now. The prince laments on how foolish he's been, and how he wants to start trying to understand others, starting with Agni and Mina. So he asks to be included in Ciel and Sebastian's investigation. Logistics talk? I'm not sure what to call this phase of their task. Ciel declines though, stating that he doesn't want to babysit himself. Wait. He doesn't want to babysit Soma himself. There we go, I skipped a word. He doesn't want to babysit Soma, essentially. But Ciel then also says that the door is never locked, essentially giving Soma the go-ahead to include himself anyway, which he does after apologizing. Ciel and the gang then get back to discussing the matters at hand, which means figuring out that Harold West's grand master plan is using the exhibition of Indian culture as a way to earn the royal warrant for his curry company. A seal that essentially means Queen Victoria liked his curry. This would ideally boost his sales, which has been down since the curry fad was kind of fading a little bit. Oh, and also the attacks on the Anglo-Indians were an attempt to crush or hinder his competition. They then come to the consensus that Agni was helping out because of Mina, and was writing his prayers and apologies in the letters left at the attacks, signing them with the symbol of his god Kali. Sebastian then states that Agni worships and lives for Soma, despite not being at his side. Honestly, I think Soma really needed to hear this as well. Sure, he needed to be knocked down a peg earlier, but he also needs to hear that the people he cares for also cares for him. Humans need community to thrive, even if that community is just your devoted servant and the weird child you've recently befriended. Ciel and Sebastian leave their investigation at that, leaving the task of helping Agni to Soma. And since their duties are done, given that West isn't really part of the underworld, Ciel takes it upon himself to take advantage of the lack of competition Harold West set up. Ciel decided that Phantom Company is going to be competing in the curry competition to earn the royal warrant for themselves. And there's the selfish bitch that he's known for being. Can he win? Will he overcome being a white boy from Britain? The country known for having the blandest food palette? Well, Soma isn't so confident that Ciel and Sebastian can overcome Agni's master curry cooking, and thus begins the curry arc, which is still a part of the Indian Butler arc, so let's just dive right in. What, you thought this was the end of the video? We're in for the long haul, my guy. A chapter in which Sebastian learns how to cook. Honestly, I think this is a really cute chapter. It's a known fact and stereotype that England has the blandest food with no character, mixed with the fact that Sebastian is using prepackaged catch-all curry spice instead of fresh ingredients and selective spices. It's no wonder his curry is mid. I do like how he depends on Prince Soma to help out with what he knows about Agni's process, and also just the fact that he has an expanded taste palette when it comes to spices and curry in particular. And boy, do they get down to testing. Taste testing, that is. I really love the added detail of Bard, Mayren, and Finny reacting in the background and seeing them get eliminated as the spice or flavor becomes too much. It's so funny to me. We get another bit of Sebastian just not understanding humans, interrupted by Ciel, who came down to check on the progress and to make a request for his afternoon snack, which prompts Lau to ask him if he wants Sebastian to fail. Ciel honestly doesn't really care if they win or lose. Like, it would be cool if they win. It'd be really nice and great if they got that royal warrant. But it'd be really great to see Sebastian lose. You know, the classic being an ass and waiting for the other's downfall dynamic that Ciel and Sebastian tend to share. Sometimes it seems like Sebastian is a toy or a rival to Ciel, with the way that he likes to play with the demon and find scenarios in which Sebastian cannot win. It's a fun dynamic, and one that lets the reader forget the real power dynamic at play here, one of predator and prey. But that's a story for another day. A day far, far from this playful, mean pushing that they do with one another. At least that's what it feels like when the horror of their relationship is at the back of our minds, while we watch them tease one another when the stakes are low. After what feels like endless experiments, Sebastian has been able to master the right spice blend, but there's still something missing. Something seems to jump out at him, not literally, but something catches his eye while he's cleaning up at the end of the day, and this new addition to the curry is able to take Prince Soma somewhere new, a combination of his familiar home experiences mixed with the vibes of England. Honestly, I really love how Yana Toboso conveys the mixture of taste with what's essentially a wild imagination conjuring up a vision. Sometimes, food really hits that hard, I guess, and it turns out Sebastian was inspired by Ciel. The man really thought, what if I put chocolate in it? And it worked. We get a quick scene of Agni and Harold West preparing their own curry for the competition, and Agni finds out that the Phantom Corporation has entered to compete. He wonders if this is Soma's doing, and honestly, it's not, but it also is, but it's not, but it is, but it's not, but it is. Agni is incredibly concerned for Soma, and appears to be in a lot of emotional pain over how things have turned out. Maybe concern isn't the right word here. He's clearly got a lot of regret for how things are going, and that concerns Agni. Anyway, Sebastian is confident he'll win, Ciel is annoyed, nothing new or special there. Dare I say it's time for some competitive curry? This chapter starts off with some really cute details. Ciel brings all of his servants out to play at this festival, and I really love seeing their reactions to seeing things like elephants for the first time ever in their lives. Prince Soma is also very patient and willing to explain things to them. At least that's how I'm choosing to interpret this. It's my understanding that noblemen wouldn't actually take their servants out to things like this, at least not typically, so the fact that we see Ciel do things like this supports my silly headcanon that they're more of a family unit than they let on. I mean, come on. Ciel and Finny are very much sibling-coded. Mayrin and Bard could be like the older cousins of sorts. Tanaka is just kind of there in this found family, but he was also a part of Ciel's original family unit since he had been a servant for Ciel's father. And of course, Sebastian assumes the parental role. Now don't get me wrong. I am under no delusions that Sebastian genuinely cares for these people, especially not as a family. Not after I make a point to point out every time the manga states that Sebastian doesn't even feel love. I'm not that delusional. But he still assumes a motherly role of sorts, taking care of the others, making sure they're fed and safely tucked into bed each night. It's honestly kind of cute, and part of what allows the readers to forget that this is a horrible demon pushing and enabling Ciel on his self-destructive path. Something makes the soul taste better or something, I don't know. But I do know Sebastian is a demon at heart and a parental figure on the outside. Ciel and gang have a run-in with Harold West, who's incredibly confident in his win, which makes Ciel very excited to knock him down a peg or two. We also get a conversation on how West was most likely not going to deliver on his promise to Agni, and instead keep exploiting him and manipulating him if he didn't just kill him in order to keep his wrongdoings under wraps, which, you know what, makes sense. Truly tragic, though. Sebastian then meets up with Agni, who is distressed to see that he's there. Honestly, this man is going through it just to reunite Soma with Mina. Agni is so deeply devoted to Prince Soma that he'll do anything to make him happy, even if that means doing things that he knows are wrong. Honestly, it makes Agni a very interesting antagonist of sorts. He's not a bad guy, instead more of a pawn, but he's the main source of power, making him more or less the guy Sebastian has to fight, even if it's just fighting via cooking. He and Sebastian are really living the same life in that regard. You guys remember how I went on a long vent in the Red Butler deep dive about Viscount Druitt and how much I hate him. Well, the guy's back. I really hate this reoccurring gag character. Nothing about him is funny. Stop trying to make me think he's a ha-ha funny man when he is in fact just creepy. Anyway, his antics are put on the back burner because it's time for a segment of Great British Bake Off. Oh wait, wrong show? Sorry. Black Butler takes on a cooking competition, complete with commentary on what the two main competitors are doing and the ingredients they're using. Honestly, none of this is super important in the long run, but if you're passionate about food and cooking, and if any of this information is actually correct, it could be an interesting bit. I'm just not that into food like that. Anyway, on to taste testing. It doesn't really matter what the other chefs did, because we knew from the get-go that they were not going to be the main competition. It was going to be between Agni and Sebastian. The text has told us multiple times that the other chefs are just not really good, or at least not worthy of worrying about. The real cherry on top here, though, is that the first chef to be judged used curry powder and then was ridiculed for using such a low-class method. Agni's curry is absolutely amazing, to no one's surprise. Viscount Druitt has some weird stuff to say about it. And now it's Sebastian's turn. Admittedly, his presentation does not hit as hard as Agni's. His curry is hidden away in a bun, which is a shock to everyone at first. But honestly, the anime made this curry out to be an absolute banger back in the day, and I've wanted to try a curry bun ever since. Are they real? Do they exist? No idea. I want to try one though. It looks delectable. Viscount Druitt has some more weird stuff to say, and honestly, this makes CL's skin crawl. Me too, bestie. Me too. I hate that man. Just as Sebastian and Agni were to be declared dual winners in a tie, the queen shows up, or as Bard likes to call her, that funky granny. Wait, this doesn't seem right. Ah, that's better. Anyway, after a bout of grief for her late husband, Queen Victoria announces Sebastian's curry as the winner, her reason being accessibility. Due to how it was prepared, it was easy for all to eat, including children. It was good for the wealthy and the poor, something I guess she's passionate about? I don't know, sounds fake to me. But anyway, she talks about how Sebastian's curry is pretty much inclusive, and that's good for the country, especially as they get closer to entering a new century. Honestly, Black Butler does a bit to romanticize Queen Victoria. At least that's what it looks like to me. I know Japan had its own hand in colonization back in the day, so I could see how Japanese culture may be a bit more forgiving of other colonizers, but hey, I also don't really know what I'm talking about. All I know is that I'm American and it's in my blood to hate the British. That's a joke, by the way. That is a joke, in case you could not tell. Sweet baby boy reunited with his special important person. How wonderful, right? Seems this reunion wasn't at all what we thought it would be. Turns out, Mina didn't actually like living in India and being a servant and stuck in that lower caste system. And she was actually really happy to leave with West, becoming his wife and enjoying life as part of the upper class. We then learned that this truth and brash nature is what Agni was working so hard to protect Soma from. If he worked with West, then they'd figure something out and put on a show for Soma or something. Whatever it took to keep him from learning the truth. However, none of that worked. And Mina laid it out as it is, which, to Prince Soma's credit, he took pretty well, even going as far as to apologizing for not taking the time to consider her point of view. Soma has this short monologue about how he'd look to blame others for his problems instead of taking responsibility for his own shortcomings. He then has a heartfelt moment with Agni, asking him to be his Kansama again. He's grown so much since the start of this story arc, and I'm really proud of him. Anyway, there's a sweet moment between Queen Victoria being a bit of a grandma to Ciel. No, I don't think they're related, but it is a sweet moment nonetheless, and it's just so grandma-coded to me. I also love the quiet resignation Ciel has in this moment as well. It embarrasses him, but at the same time, he's not angry. He accepts it with little complaint. The boy most likely is starving for that genuine familial love, and he's getting it wherever he can, including the actual Queen of England. Wild if you think about it, really. Honestly, Queen Victoria is probably similar to a close family friend, given that she worked somewhat closely with Vincent, and seems to be fond of working with Ciel as well. She seems to be incredibly kind-hearted, and at least with Ciel, and she's aware of how young he is, and even goes as far as telling him that she is amazed at what he is doing and how he's doing his job so well despite his age. Afterwards, Agni and Soma have a heartfelt moment with Sebastian and Ciel respectively, expressing gratitude for all they have learned from them. Agni even exposes that he's glad Soma and Ciel met each other. Me too, bestie. This part is genuinely so sweet, and it is also the first time we see Ciel and Sebastian actually befriend someone. I genuinely think Agni is Sebastian's only friend ever. It's a nice thing that doesn't happen very often, but it is so greatly needed, especially for Ciel. We get another moment of Sebastian trying to flex his superiority on humans. There was a lot of that during the story arc, to be honest. I have no idea how Agni doesn't pick up on the fact that Sebastian isn't human, or maybe he just assumes Sebastian is kind of like him. Anyway, after the heartfelt friendship vibes, we see Lau confront West and Mina. Oh, by the way, did I mention that Lau has been here this whole time with his sister? Anyway, he does something to be sure that West doesn't cause any more problems. Is it just an attack? Murder? Intimidation? Who knows? Either way, it never comes up again. At least it hasn't, as of chapter 200. I kind of doubt it ever will, to be honest. Back to Ciel and the gang. Ciel is honestly really sweet in his own way to Soma, even going to grab a handkerchief for him to wipe his tears, only to discover an envelope from the Queen in his pocket. Oh, what could this be? This envelope includes tickets to Noah's Ark Circus. Why do I always add an S to Ark? Boy, this would be a great place to end the Indian Butler arc. But alas, we have one last chapter to cover. Moving on from the eventful Curry arc, it's back to Ciel's day-to-day life. Well, almost. Prince Soma has invited himself to stay at Ciel's. He wants to hang out with his new bestie and prove that he will work hard to become a proper gentleman. If you couldn't tell already, this chapter is a low-stakes, almost filler type of chapter in between major story arcs, but it's a wholesome breather. Even if the overall tone of the Indian Butler arc wasn't as grim as the Red Butler arc or the following circus arc, it's still a welcome change of pace. Anyway, we see the return of the television, which I need to point out. I did say previously that it was historically inaccurate, but it's been pointed out to me that TVs in some capacity did actually exist back then. However, the TV that Ciel would have had would be a mechanical one, which works kind of like those toys where you had like a reel with pictures in it and pressing a button would rotate the reel and show you a different picture, or like those plastic TV toys where you would press a button and it would flip to another picture. Does anyone know what I'm talking about? Or am I just alienating anyone here who is not in their mid to late 20s or older? Anyway, I am here to say, TVs in a sense are historically accurate to Black Butler. However, the way that Ciel and Finney talked about catching a program at a certain time is still historically inaccurate, and the way that Soma is watching TV isn't super accurate either. It sounds more like he's talking about a modern TV with the people stuck inside and not knowing how it worked. But thank you so much to the person who pointed that out. TVs did exist in the late 1800s. Just mechanical ones and not electronic ones. So it's still a bit different, but it's honestly kind of cool, and I did not know that at all, even though I was a film major, and I definitely probably covered that in my history of media classes, but you know what, I forgot. Anyway, now that CL has started his day and Prince Soma is distracted by watching TV, Sebastian and the others have a lot to do to prepare for their guests that evening. And Agni is such a king, willing to step up and help, even going as far as to helping the others with their tasks. This is also how we get a bit of backstory on the servants, Finny being someone who was found? Unable to spend time outside before despite how much he loved being outside, and that's why he became a gardener. But his strength causes a lot of problems. I wonder how he got strong. Next up is Bard, the dumbass who thinks it's good to cook with a blowtorch, flamethrower, you name it. If it cooks fast, it's good enough for him. But it's not actually good, and he's gotta get used to the peaceful environment where he's not rushing to prepare and eat his food as fast as humanly possible. What has this man possibly been through? Is it war, perhaps? Finally, we have Mayrin. She really doesn't drop anything too wild, just the fact that she treasures what Ciel has given her. Even if the prescription on her glasses are no longer what she needs, she's very grateful for her position and is really happy being a maid. Good for her. She also mentions that she's never really worn skirts before working for Ciel, which is pretty unusual for a woman in this time period. Could hint at a couple things here, but considering how this manga has treated its actual canonical trans character and the fact that I know Mayrin's backstory already, I'm thinking it's more of a hint that she grew up in unusual circumstances, perhaps in the streets? After Agni spends a bit of time helping everyone, Sebastian asks that he remain in his room once their guest arrives, since it is Lord Randall, Commissioner of Scotland Yard, and Agni did maybe kind of definitely have something to do with the attacks that they had been investigating. Agni is honestly conflicted. He feels as if he should be arrested and judged for his crimes despite the circumstances, but Sebastian assures him that all is well, and even uses his loyalty to Prince Soma to guilt-trip him into laying low. Randall shows up, with Aberline in tow. Honestly, I really like Aberline. He was such a good character in the anime, and I really don't remember him in anything else. He was a very minor character, and is completely overshadowed by Sharp Hanks from the musical. While Aberline's character in the musicals are pretty fun as well, but Hanks is the best to me, so the one I mostly remember. Such a silly guy. Also, Aberline gets along really well with Ciel, and appreciates the thing that Randall is displeased by in the Phantom Hive manor. So that's probably why I liked him so much initially. He's just a good guy who gets along with my boy. Randall is less than pleased to be there, but Ciel is putting on pleasant airs. And since each of the servants had Agni's help in smoothly completing their tasks, the everything going wrong type of comedy that these more lighthearted chapters employ is delegated to Agni's actions. Sebastian has his work cut out for him when it comes to keeping Agni from turning himself into the police. But what can I say? This demon is good at coming up with lies and excuses for just about anything. Sebastian has met his match though. Agni is too good, and ends up interrupting dinner. But before he can fully confess, Sebastian ends up shooting him with a wine cork, and Prince Soma interrupts instead, causing a bit of a fuss. But Sebastian introduces them as friends, and all is well. Almost. After Randall and Aberline leave, Ciel ends up getting onto them for causing a fuss, but then he also hires them to essentially house sit for his townhouse in London, giving Prince Soma and Agni an excuse to stay in London and nearby for whenever the plot requires them. And Soma is now given an avenue to become his own person, earning his own way in life. Also, Soma calls Ciel his best friend here, and I love them so much. Just two little guys. I love it when Ciel makes friends. It doesn't happen very often. but when it does, they're good people. Now it's time for Ciel and Sebastian to pack up and go to the circus, obsessed with the idea that as soon as he sends Soma and Agni to the townhouse, he also heads to the townhouse for his next job from the queen. Clingy besties. And that's it! The Indian Butler arc. Honestly, this arc is pretty much just an introduction to Agni and Soma, and the setup and foundation for Soma's character arc, which mostly happens in the background from here on out. But it's a really sweet arc, and one that starts to really flesh out the character backstories, not only for Ciel, but the servants as well, which is pretty neat. I also think this arc goes to great lengths to soften Ciel up a bit. In the previous arc, we got to really spend time with his cruel and conniving side. While we did see glimpses of the boy who cares a lot about others, it was hard to see to what extent Ciel really did have a heart. But with the introduction of Agni and Prince Soma, we can clearly see that Ciel is actually incredibly kind. Even if he puts up walls and hides his kindness behind selfishness and fake aloofness. He's incredibly patient with Soma, to some degree. Honestly, I would also get annoyed and snap if a stranger invited themselves into my home and then proceeded to interrupt my busy routine for the day. But behind the frustration, Ciel still cares for Soma and goes out of his way to help him, and also keep him around. Ciel didn't have to let Soma and Agni stay in his townhouse. He would have been well within his rights to kick them out of the manor, telling them to screw off, but it would have been a bit mean, and that is no way to treat a friend. Even if you're reluctant to call the friend a friend, Ciel cares a lot about these two, and it is very clear that he also considers them as friends. They were pretty fast friends, and I love that. I think that was the main purpose of this story arc. Introduce some narrative foils, a what if for Ciel, and to establish that behind the evil persona lies a kind and empathetic kid willing to make friends. A side we don't see out in the open too often, but one that's undeniably there. Ciel is just a kid. He's just a silly little guy who loves his friends, even if said friends are weird princes trying to figure out how to be truly kind and not selfish. Honestly, something Ciel is still working on himself, but I digress. Do you really think Sebastian would allow Ciel to shed his childlike selfishness? I'm sure that's some kind of spice in the world of eating souls. Story content aside, can we talk about how much the art has evolved in just these 5 volumes? Ciel is looking more and more like the round baby face we know and love. Well, to be more exact, once Yana Toboso nailed this art style, we mostly stick with it, given a couple of adjustments here and there, up until the later story arcs where Yana Toboso's art style has become a lot softer, a little bit more round, and Sebastian's design is tweaked to match Yuta Furukawa, the actor who played Sebastian in the musicals. Well, from the 2015 rerun of Licorice That Blazes the Earth to the Tango on the Campagna. He had the role of Sebastian up until it was recast in 2021 for the public school's Secret, the musical adaptation of the Weston arc. This was kind of mind-blowing news when I first found out. I haven't been able to watch any of the musicals past the circus one, so I can't speak for the new actor, but I'm sure he did well. Yuta Furukawa just embodied Sebastian for so many years, so it's weird to see a new guy. All this is so unrelated to what this video is even about. I'm so sorry to go on a little tangent about the art and the musicals. Anyway, I think by the end of the Indian Butler arc, Black Butler has finally arrived at its main art style that most people know it for, even if it doesn't reflect the current art style of the manga. Now then, who's ready to go to the circus?
Ladies and gentlemen,